So what's going on, everyone? Really excited for the conversation today. What's going on, Glenn? We are going to be talking all things modern outbound. And why this is so important right now is as organizations are in different industries are at such different parts of this kind of back to market, or we're not ready to go back to market process. Modern outbound is evolving very quickly. How do we get in front of people? What's the right messaging? What's the right strategy at a global level? And so I'm super excited to have Mr. David Rubenstein from Outreach, fresh to the organization. How long have you been there now?
I just hit the 100-day mark.
100-day mark. So what's going on, McKinsey? So great. So as you join in here, if you don't mind, drop into the chat your company and your role. So I think it'll be really helpful for us. Help us to understand if we've got kind of a mix of executives, if we've got people more on the front lines. Let us know what we have, and we can make sure to try to steer the conversation, a mix of strategy and tactics. I think we're going to try to do a good mix of that today. We're going to try to do a good mix of, keeping it high level, but also sharing some additional, more tactical details. All right. So we've got some enablement folks, some biz dev, account manager, inside sales, director, account exec, director of strategic partnerships. It's always been another one of my favorite job titles, David. Is I feel like director of strategic partnerships is another one of I don't know what they do, but it sounds cool.
It's important.
Yeah, it's important for sure. So cool. So yeah, David, do you want to maybe do a quick high level on your background? I know what you're up to, but I'd love to hear maybe a little bit about your, maybe for the audience so they can hear a little bit about you and what you're up to, and then what you're doing at Outreach as well.
Sure. So hi everyone, I'm Dave Rubenstein. As I said, just hit the day 100 mark at Outreach, but have been in the space for a while. So earlier in my career, I've done everything from kind of startup employee number 9, pre-revenue. So for those on the phone that are kind of wondering how you approach things from a small business, I've definitely been, first sales guy / head of sales. So I've worn that hat. Prior to Outreach, I spent the last 6 years in leadership at Salesforce. So also understand kind of from small to kind of running a machine. And in between, I worked for a smaller company that, in the 100 million-ish range that was acquired by Blackstone. So I've kind of done different size companies. So I've seen a few things, and hopefully I can be a resource to y'all.
I love it, man. Well, look, and I'm looking forward to this. And if you, it'd be good to know how many of you are already using Outreach. If you are not using Outreach, see, David, I can plug you because I don't work at Outreach, so I can talk about it. Outreach, we've been partnering with Outreach. David, we didn't talk about this in kind of our prep. I think we were probably the first ever power user. I was part of Scaled 1.0 as we were running outsourced demand gen. And we had 25 seats in 2015. So we were ahead of the game on sales engagement. And so I've been a big fan of the platform. And I think what's really important for a lot of people to understand is just how much of a strategic resource Outreach is to a tech stack. Kristen Connor says Tableau is on the Outreach bandwagon. Love it. All right. More and more of you should be. We obviously are big on the tool and platform, and we'll get into some more tactical details later, but let's maybe start a little high level here. Feel free, everyone, start dropping your questions in the Q&A. Amazingly, we had, I think, almost 100 people send in questions in advance, which David is unheard of. So Ben is an Apollo.io fan. He had to throw it out there. Hey, look, if you need contact information and a little bit more churn and quick, I get it. Apollo's not the worst tool. So David, for you, what do you see as some of the biggest trends for sales development? And the question is for 2020, but even as we look forward, when you are talking to leaders today and you're thinking through this, what do you see as some of the more critical, whether it's trends, at the high level, at the strategic level, what do you feel are some of the most important trends that you're seeing from conversations you're having?
Well, if you asked me that question on January 1st, my answer might have been very different than
I think so, man.
So when I think about trends for our inside folks, or our traditional inside folks versus our traditional outside folks, the roles were very different. The way we would do outreach, we knew the percentages we were going to start to see when we reached out to customers, when we picked up the phone. You knew how many dials it would take to get a hold of somebody. You knew how many emails it would take. And in the world we're in today, it's very much changed. You know, a lot of the phone calls we're making now are not getting to the people that we used to get to.
Yeah.
Lots of the emails, we're competing with a lot of noise right now. Everybody's hosting a webinar every other week. And so it becomes that much more challenging to figure out how to get someone's attention, how to get out of the fray, how to start to use other channels. You know, are you leveraging LinkedIn and others into your mix in different ways than maybe perhaps we had in the past?
Yeah. Yeah. So are there, you know, when you're having these conversations what are you hearing from leaders, the sales development leaders, you know, about, you know, with excitement, nervous, hesitate, like what would you, if you had to say the vibe, and obviously I'm sure it varies a little bit, how would you frame where kind of people's heads are at, you know, in terms of what they're seeing and kind of how they're thinking about ramping efforts or adjusting their strategy?
I'm seeing a lot of excitement on the sales development leaders. You know, if you look at the percentage of sellers, and I don't know the numbers, but the percentage of sellers out there that are inside versus outside, it wasn't 100%, but it's 100% today. Every seller is an inside seller.
That's right.
So if you're running an SDR organization, the world is coming to you, and you're really in the sweet spot. And we've got lots of outside sellers that are used to being all about relationships and walking the halls at their biggest accounts. They don't have that ability anymore, and they're in the office. They're in their home offices, never leaving. The SDR leaders are in a position to provide a lot of coaching for the broader organization about how to drive scale and make some of those folks that are homebound more productive.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're bringing up a good point about enterprise. That enterprise, I feel like, has viewed tools in the past as like, well, that's not for us. You know, I've known Hank at Honeywell for 10 years. So I don't know if these tools are for us. And I think what people are realizing is sales engagement is just a container of activities. You can put whatever you want in them. The first touch point can be like, send them a bottle of wine. The second touch point can be, you know, connect on LinkedIn. And so what I feel like, to your point, from a trend standpoint, this is an opportunity for all of the enterprise sellers out there to step your game up. That if you are in a mid-market or enterprise sales and you've avoided technology, because I feel like a lot do, and David, you know, you've done a lot of work in enterprise, you know how kind of the enterprise guys think from time to time, that now is the time to understand all this, you know, all sales engagement is, it's a workflow management that allows you to stay better engaged, not having to remember. I'm sure every seller can equate to those like, oh crap, I forgot to follow up with John. I forgot to, I think we all can relate. And that's why I feel like now is a really important time. And you mentioned this, David, which is maybe some of these guys aren't going back in the field. Maybe they're not carrying that bag for a year. What are you going to do? You know?
I would say a very high percentage of the customers that I talk to they say, well, we're a relationship business. We're based on handshakes. That's, you know, automation may work for other businesses.
That's right.
But it doesn't work for ours. And, you know, I think that may be true for a select handful of contacts within accounts. But if you're talking about a large account, you know, if you're talking about you're calling on a Procter & Gamble or a JP Morgan or some of these others, you may know a couple people there, but the chances are there are many, many, many contacts that could influence your company's ability to do business there that you're not talking to. So the automation may not be with your main contacts. It may be with the people that you're not talking to as a way of extending reach. And in other businesses, you know, I talk to companies in wealth management. So you think about wealth management, how sensitive is that? You've got someone who's giving you all of their money to invest. And the thought of investment, the thought of automating that communications scares people. But when you start to find other use cases and you look at the problem they're solving, in wealth management right now, there's something like $10 trillion that's going to transfer from the boomers to their kids.
That's right.
I can tell you that my parents have a different financial advisor than I do.
That's
And
exactly it.
so
It's the
in
number
that
one,
honey
just so you know,
process,
David, just to validate this, we've worked with some companies in the financial services death tech space. I mean, which is actually, there's like 2 or 3 different companies. And the number one reason for churn from a financial advisor is death. Number one reason.
right? So if you look at that specific example, if we went into a financial services firm and wealth management, they'd say, no, we're all set. I know John or Sally very well. I've known him for 30 years. I'm not going to automate any communication. My next question then would be, well, how well do you know their daughter who just graduated from
That's
college?
it.
She's got her first job and she doesn't know how to invest her 401k and where to put that in. Would you want to start that relationship? Well, I don't have time. Well, great. This might be a perfect way of kind of reaching out and scheduling some time. So there's a lot of ways you can do that.
Yeah, but what I think too, David, it's not even about automation. It's about automating remembering. And I feel like that's the disconnect a lot of people have at times is they feel like if I'm going to use a tool to help me, I'm going to automate. That's not what with all of our clients, right? It is about, touch point 1 on an enterprise client could be do research on LinkedIn. Touch point 2 is connect and engage on a piece of content. Touch point 3 is maybe call or send them a DM. Too many people, when they think about using tech, they always think marketing automation, right? And really, it's just workflow management. And I feel like that is an enterprise seller. You got to get that out of your head. You get like exactly what you're saying. And one, you can't afford to nurture every single person. Even if you're an enterprise seller, you've got 10 target accounts, but there's, like you said, there's 100 people you might want to talk to. So I feel like
the part where it gets really exciting is when you start to think about machine learning and how that comes in, and when customers respond, to actually be able to analyze the response and understand it's not just about knowing who responded and how many responses you got, but what was the sentiment of those responses. And then and then what happens to every seller out there is when you get a response and you don't know how to respond to it, what do? You put it off and you do it later. And so putting the information at a rep's fingertips so I can interpret what message came in and what the best way to answer that objection is. Put it at, and so you can respond right away versus having a rep go out there. That's the stuff that gets me really excited.
That's awesome. Yeah. And this next one's kind of a follow-up here, which I think is a good one. If we maybe take it down the funnel a little bit, just like a tad, and let's maybe talk about the sales process. Like, what do you think? So we're talking a little bit about this shift from inside to outside, which we were already headed this way. COVID just obviously mass accelerated it, right? If you look at Salesforce has been talking about this in their state of sales since 2015, about how more and more and more and more companies are moving to inside. What do you see as the next major disruptor in the sales process? Like when you think at the macro level, you thinking how your sellers, right? You're running a team in the East, how they're going to interact with buyers, whether it's like, post meeting or during the first meeting, what are some of the changes you're seeing in the sales process itself?
Well, I think some of the changes are starting with the salespeople that we hire. And I think one of the things that, you used to do is you'd hire people to come into your office. And so we have a New York office and we'd hire people all around New York. And now if you look at kind of where the market is going, one of the sales leaders I have on my team right now, he's based in Seattle. And he covers the New York territory. And so, as you start to think about how you staff and where you staff, the world just got a lot bigger from a hiring perspective. So that's an area that we've seen a big change. And I think there was a second part to your question. I want to make sure I'm hitting.
No, it's just like when you think about, so there's the hiring process. What about the way that you interact with customers? Obviously it's digital, right? We're doing a lot more Zoom. For me, I feel like the beautiful part for enterprise sales is what COVID has done is forced every, let's call them middle-aged executive to learn how to use technology and do what we're doing right now, which is actually a really good thing. That now they're used to getting comfortable not having to meet someone face-to-face, building some amount of rapport via Zoom because they're being forced to. And that, I think, is one of the big trends we're seeing is that what this is actually doing, which is an amazing, unintended consequence of all this, is it's actually training buyers how to utilize tech like this to then do more deals virtually, and we're seeing, obviously people closing 6-7 figure deals, not meeting face to face.
Yeah. I mean, it's also just humanizing the prospecting piece. I can remember kind of, not that long ago, maybe 6 months ago, or even a year ago, I could be in my home office, and if if my wife or one of my kids or dog came in, I'd be kind of I'm on a call.
Yeah, for sure.
Now the world has changed, so I'm like, come on in, meet Jake and everybody. I'm on a call right now. Hey, everybody, say hi to my wife.
Yeah,
my kids. It's just I think people are becoming are getting more comfortable being real with other people. And when I look at the calls that our teams are doing every day, we're in people's houses every day. They're inviting us into their homes. We're meeting their spouses and their kids and their dogs. We're seeing pictures in the background. And I would say the level of authenticity in the conversations that we're having is like none I've seen in my career, because we're all going through something together, and we're having very real conversations with people much earlier than we would typically in a sales cycle.
Yeah. I think that is a key component to bring out. And again, it's that we're getting used to being able to build a little bit of rapport in different ways, as opposed to a bottle of wine, a steak dinner, and the golf course, and other, we'll call it enterprise salesy type of, things. So what about spending freezes right now? So again, we're talking about kind of modern outbound. We're talking about trends. Obviously, look, one of the questions we got multiple times, hey, how are people, like you said, I think that there's a pretty positive vibe out there right now, right? I think there's a lot of positivity around the market. With that said, it's still like, hey, it's a more common excuse now that like, oh, this is really interesting, David. Can we pick this back up in Q4? This is really interesting. We need to wait and see. So, how do you see that playing out? How do you see how is your team tackling people that have hiring, or not hiring, maybe hiring freezes too, but certainly spending freezes? What are you guys doing to get creative? What are you guys doing to have those creative conversations with buyers?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is understand where they are in their kind of journey with everything that's going on. And that starts with a question early on, something to the extent of, talk to me about what's going on in your business. Are you all in survival mode? Have you kind of adjusted and kind of right-sized your business, or are you scaling? And if you kind of put them in a box and understand, if they say they're in survival mode, then the next question is, well, just out of curiosity, you're in survival mode. How come? Were you hoping that I could help you, or did you just need a break from the craziness?
Right.
And I think those are some of the kinds of questions to ask, but you have to understand where that company is in their journey. What are the priorities that the business had at the beginning of the year? Are they the same? Have they changed? Are there new metrics that they're measuring on? I think those become really, really important things to understand. I can tell you that probably a very, very high percentage of deals, if not all, are going to CFOs. So
yeah, that's exactly right.
We're still transacting, but the percentage of CFOs that are approving our deals this year versus a year ago, it's radically different. And so you should assume, if you're doing a deal, there's a business case that comes in.
That's right.
And if they're not asking for a business case, you may not be talking to the right person, because somebody has to justify a spend, particularly if it's a new budget line item.
I think that's such a great call out, man, that it's always been important. And then I think there was another group of people that almost over-indexed it on the old ROI calculator, right? David, you're probably like me. I've never seen an ROI calculator that didn't show like actually returns are going to be okay, right? Like actually you're going to break even, right? But I think that you're right, that it's, you're putting together the business case partnership, and then you're helping to make it easy for your people to talk about the financials too. So they're not having to kind of think through what the impact that this is going to have is going to be, from an effect, whether it's an effective standpoint from a quality, or whether it's an efficiency standpoint from a more standpoint. And I feel like one of the trends I've seen is a lot of leaders have defaulted to hitting the more button, that like more activities, more this. And, I was talking to a rep last week, and, she's like, I'm being told I've got to make, 100 plus activities and make them more relevant. It's like, well, that's kind of hard to do. And so, when you think about, so we're talking a little about budgets, and we've got some good questions coming in from around the sales cycle itself. how do you see people judging effectiveness right now? You know, how do you feel like, how do you see, you know, like whenever you're thinking about your team, you know, where maybe are we looking for more early funnel metrics? Like, you know, how are you judging kind of early success with your team in this kind of COVID, you know, world and environment?
I think, pipeline and sales are good, but sometimes those are kind of trailing indicators. I think the first thing I look at is, are we meeting with prospects? You know, do we have enough meetings? Because if we're not meeting, then pipeline won't happen. So I think we're really focused early on. Sometimes it's taking more meetings, more engagement to generate the quality level of pipeline. We have probably a lot more curious buyers out there.
Right.
So people who've been home, they just saved 2 hours a day because they're not commuting. They're not ready to go back out in the other room with their family. So they're willing to take a call or two, and out of curiosity, you know, I'm just curious. We have a higher percentage, I would say, than I've ever seen of just curious calls. Just
right.
You called me. I just want to hear what you're all about.
Yeah, I needed to break up my day. I needed a different flavor of Zoom. But what I think that you just did, so we had a question here in the chat. It was from Savio James, like how to fast track the SQL to sell process in enterprise sales. But there's something that you said, David, that I think is really important. And you said it, and I think it was your first response or second, which was, in the second conversation, you know, you've got to start to feel comfortable as a salesperson of just asking. Look, okay, so you're just curious, okay? So does that mean that like there's no like, tell me where we could maybe find a way to work together? Is there an opportunity? And just being able to have a very honest conversation. I feel like one of the behaviors that I observed early on was that people were almost scared to be in sale. It was like, well, I know it's uncertain times, so that's fine, bye, right? Like, oh, okay, you're just curious. Okay, that's right, times are very uncertain. It's uncertain times, bye, right? Like, so how do you balance that, right? Like, because I think there's probably because we have a lot of sellers on here, a lot of directors of sales. We've got a mix here, some VPs. You know, how do you deal on that with your team? You know, how do you sort through? And this is gonna put you on the spot a little bit, but I think it's a good one. How do you sort through the like, I'm just curious versus John wimped out and just said it was uncertain times? You know, like how do you balance that in a time like this where there are these industries and these things that are happening versus, hey, we should be pushing a little bit here. You know, it's okay for us to ask these questions and push. Like, how do you balance that right now?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it really is about kind of leading with empathy and understanding where that customer is, what's going on in their business. Kind of, we talked earlier is kind of what's going on. Are you in kind of the world is on fire mode? Are you in survival mode, or have you kind of settled down? And that's important. So when someone starts a call and they say, hey, I was just curious, I'd say that's great. We'd love to fill you in terms of what's going on with our business. There's obviously a lot of different directions we could go. I want to make sure that I focus the time and make it valuable for you. Is there a specific area you wanted us to dig into? You know, what specific area would you like us to dig into? You know, and usually they'll give you something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where you've got to feel comfortable. Like, you know, whenever we were talking to people, this is even a few months ago, there's no harm in asking that question and then asking a couple of follow-ups to see, you know, because again, sometimes in their mind that there is no path forward. And that's part of our job in sales, is to kind of, flesh it out and see if there's anything here we can work with, you know, like, is there an opportunity?
And I think someone had asked before, how do you accelerate enterprise sales?
That's right.
There's not an easy way, but what I can share is that there are 4 questions that I ask my team on pretty much every deal, right? And those 4 questions are: what problem are we solving? Why is that a problem now? So invariably, someone will tell you a problem, and my response will be, well, wasn't that a problem for this business?
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
So what's changed their business to make that a problem now? Who is looking for you to solve that problem? Right? Who's looking to you to solve the problem? So I'm talking to you, maybe you're not the decision maker, but there's someone in your business that's saying, you've got to solve that.
Yeah.
And the last question is, and when are they expecting it to be solved by? And invariably with most customers, when you say, when does it need to be solved by? The response is always yesterday. ASAP.
Yeah, which is bullshit, which is complete bullshit.
And the seller has happy ears, and
Mm-hmm.
they're piping the deal for this month. They're excited. They said, no, Dave, it has to be. They said it should be done ASAP. And so what we try to coach is to double click on ASAP and just ask and say, hey, just realistically, since yesterday's already passed and it's the summertime, and I'm sure lots of folks are going on vacation, and your IT team is going to need a project scheduled in advance. Can we talk about what's a realistic date? And they'll say, yeah, maybe Q4. And then, my AEs think Q4 is December 31st. I think it's October 1st. So my next question is always, well, hey, October 3, are you thinking beginning of the quarter, end of the quarter? Well, I don't know. And then you kind of give them dates and you say, hey, well, is it, what do you say, middle of November before Thanksgiving? Yeah, that's probably good. Okay, let's build a plan together from November 15th so we can help you achieve it. But it's those four questions leading to kind of building a plan together with our customers.
Yeah, and what you're doing, and what the also thing I'll call out though is you're also asking, the simplest technique that we'll work with, an org is just why 2 times, why, or tell me more 2 times. And so it's the four, it's the 4 questions, and then it's just okay, great, tell me more. It's like it's digging in, and I think it's really important to do that more now than ever.
Yeah, once you think you know the answer, ask another question.
Yes.
Dig a little bit deeper. It could even be a little bit uncomfortable for you because
that's right.
You think you know the answer, but never assume. Ask another question. You'd be surprised how much more information comes out.
That's right. That's the fundamentals. The one I'll ask that I always ask to every rep, and it's the first question that I'll ask, and it's something that they'll learn pretty quickly, is how do they make money? Because if you don't understand what a company does and how they make money, how can you help them? If you don't understand that they sell industrial manufacturing to this sector, well, you can't possibly understand the nuances of their business. And I feel like a lot, and this goes for if you're an SDR. If you're an SDR demand gen, how are you going to put together a customized message if you even know what the company does or how they make money? And that one's always been a go-to for me, that if I can start to engineer my team around understanding the business, so they can talk the talk, understand the nuances of, okay, if they sell industrial manufacturing versus consumer goods, okay, they've got really long sales cycles. These are, $50 million pieces of equipment versus they're selling Keurigs. And how does that differ between the needs of those sales teams? And so I think a lot of people, and this goes for all of you, that one of the most important things that you can do as a seller or a sales development rep, and even as a sales leader, I feel like most people do not know their ICPs. They do not. They're like, we sell into manufacturing. I'm like, dude, okay, tell me more. What kind? Any kind. Okay, probably not the case, but let's go. So I feel like every organization now, my kind of advice to some of these questions has been, you have to know your buyers' industries more than ever. How are they being affected? So when you lead with some of these questions, you also know, okay, well, man, it's kind of interesting because I saw that their stock price is going like this. So there's got to be some gap here as a part of it. So, all right, David, we got a bunch more questions rolling in. This could be interesting. Glenn Ebersole, what's up, Glenn? Glenn says, interested to hear what each of you believe is the biggest reason C-suite levels to support the digital. How do you feel the I think what he's asking is basically the C-suite supporting digital marketing outreach. Like, how do you get the C-suite aligned around what you're doing? For example, David, how do you get the C-suite aligned around a technology that they might view as a part of the, demand gen team or the sales team?
Well, I think the important thing is not to frame it as a technology or as a tool, but really focus on the problem that it solves. So if the C-suite has a revenue target, right, and that they're falling short on, and you see in their earnings that they're doing it, you can start to say, hey, look, I think we may be able to help, right? And you're not doing the whole solve, but we may be able to help you drive some additional pipeline. Like mapping to a bigger problem. I
Always.
think one of the things, if I think about our business, we work with a lot of companies, larger enterprises who are acquiring companies. So we know that a big problem that many of those companies have is how do I acquire a new company and bring it into my company and institute our processes quickly. And so, that's something that we can help with. While there may be lots of details about our product and features that we offer, at a big picture level, if we can help companies acquire other companies more productively and faster, like that's interesting. We talked to some companies that are onboarding lots of SDRs, and they're hiring so many people. I don't talk in those cases. We don't talk about the features of our products. We talk about how we can help onboard SDRs faster with technology that we have. So it's really about, it's not changing the product that you have. It's just talking a little bit differently about the things that will map to initiatives that executives care about.
Yeah. And that you took the time to ask those questions up front, and, not to get too in like the tactical weeds of like discovery process, but a lot of reps, leaders even, don't understand the importance of the order of operations of questions, especially at the executive level. That if you go in and you're talking to a C-level executive about anything other, and even a VP, anything other than, company and departmental priorities at the macro level, and then you start to test into what they're doing today to solve it. That what you're getting at right now, Dave, is like you have to understand the nuances of the macro business even at the department level, as opposed to overly focusing. And this is where I think a lot of reps get hung up and SDRs get hung up trying to set meetings, is they over focus on the benefit of the feature to the end user, of like how this does this, versus understanding that, these are the goals of the organization, and these are the goals of the department. Again, like, so for yours, for that organization, the main focal point of the whole messaging is around ramp, onboarding, productivity, effectiveness, right? Like another organization might be efficiency, and it's not going to be 85 different problems. There's probably like 5, and it's just knowing when to pull out what for when. And I think that's a really good, and Becca from my marketing team, I feel like we've got to pull out his 4 questions. That's going to be a good follow-up one. I feel like your 4 questions, I think, are really simple. It's a really good test for a rep to be able to give themselves, right, before they get off a call and just look and go, back to that thing that I might have forgot. So let's go into maybe a little bit more tactical here, and we won't get too tactical. But when you are talking to people, what are you hearing in terms of the strategies they're running? So we've talked about getting more personal. We've talked about, the need to maybe be a little bit more, empathetic. What do you see, or kind of, are there things that are coming up, whether it's using LinkedIn, video, direct mail, maybe, and even just going back, because, you were the sales head of the East at Pardot, right? And so you started to you've seen these trends over time. What trends are you seeing in terms of maybe new channels people are using, or the ways they're using these channels?
I don't know that new channels have emerged, although Zoom is very much, I would consider a new channel. I don't consider it phone. I mean, it's really kind of replaced it. So Zoom is obviously something that more and more people are using, and the default seems to be camera on. So that's new for a lot of folks and getting people comfortable. I don't think that we're seeing a lot of new channels. At least I'm not from a perspective seeing a ton of new channels emerging. I think what we're finding is that every customer may respond differently. So now that you've got a bunch of different ways of reaching out to somebody, you have, and they're working from home. In the office, I tend to pick up my work phone anytime it rang.
Right.
At home, I don't pick up my cell phone if I don't know who it's from.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think there's some of those kind of nuances that that people are dealing with, which makes the SDR role even more challenging and kind of reinventing itself to try to figure out what's the best formula to get a hold of somebody.
That's perfect. And we'll get into kind of each of these, or at least parts of each of these. Anonymous attendee asked this question, was about like the art of cold calling right now, right? And how to scale it while prospecting. So how, when you think about whether it's what your team's doing, is your team using the phone right now? Are they using the phone as a big part of their prospecting?
Yeah, they are.
Cool.
They,
And
they're
you know,
new.
what's the messaging? Like, you know, right now, like how, you know, how are they communicating? You know, are they going for the meeting? Is it, you know, being softer and saying, hey, let me know if I can send you some, you know, like what do you feel like has been effective? And obviously I know you've been in the seat for just a little bit, right? So it's just kind of like, maybe it's anecdotal or what you're feeling, or maybe what you're responding to, but what do you feel like from a phone standpoint is working for people right now? You know, at least for your team.
In many cases, and it's hard. And I would say the number of meetings that we're getting, the conversion rate is lower than what it's historically been at any time. It's been a harder time to get meetings. But we're starting to get, I would say things are definitely starting to pick back up for us. Typically we're sending an email first, just kind of highlighting a reason for outreach. And then when we call, we're really tight in terms of why we're calling.
Yeah.
You know,
real quick before you go to the call, how personal, like for you all now, I mean, obviously, I mean, we're working with like mid-sized accounts, right? Like how personalized are you getting on that first email? Like, you know, how much time do you think the team's spending on it?
So it depends on the size of the account
Sure.
and the
Good
level
good call
of
out.
person we're reaching out to, right? So
Yep.
if we're
Yep.
if we're reaching out to an EVP at a big bet account, we could spend a bunch of time researching. But what we find is that when we research, we do a lot of account-based selling. So we're contacting several people within our accounts. So the best way to do it is we'll research an account. So we'll go in, we'll read kind of 10Ks, 10Qs. We'll look at key people, understand kind of what they're doing. We'll read through their activity feed on LinkedIn. We'll learn a bunch about them and about their business. And then it makes it a lot easier to crank out, 4 or 5 specific, specific, very targeted emails to others at that account.
That's right. Yeah. You can reach out to multiple people using similar that. So I think that's a good call out, right? And it's also about understanding, Kristen from Tableau is talking about the dark, this dark funnel, which I never heard intent data referred to as the dark funnel, but I kind of like it. But she's talking about, it's, you want to be smart about where you're spending your time. Like to your point, you're not doing all of this for, maybe someone at the manager level, maybe that's, some custom fields and, we call it tiering. You've got industries that are in different places. So your outreach is going to be a little bit different. And 2, you've got levels of people and it's got to be different there. So then in the call, so you're doing this email and then I interrupted you, but going back to the call. So the call, what are they doing in like that first call? Like what have you all seen success with?
So we've sent them an email. We follow up with a phone call, and I think in the phone call, you got to cut to the chase quickly.
Yeah,
it's less of hi, my name is, and more of reaching out to you because, and having a really strong reason why you've chosen to call them, right? Something that you saw that their business is doing. Yep. Something that you've seen others in their space that look like them doing that made you compelled to say, yeah, I want to reach out to you because this is what we're seeing in the industry with companies like yours. And we thought that you would be a great fit to have a conversation.
For a conversation. Yeah. And I think the key thing is what he said there is companies like yours. Guys, there's nothing that tells me that you're a salesperson if you just say companies like yours than that line. The key is how good you get at understanding micro nuances of industries will have a direct impact on your likelihood to book meetings. Not enough reps appreciate understanding, like I said before, the difference between someone who's engaged in industrial manufacturing versus maybe manufacturing airplane equipment versus maybe manufacturing a Keurig versus mainly manufacturing some other physical good. And I think not enough reps take the time to just think through. But what I used to do for my teams is, we built out these matrices of like industry, sub-industry, small, medium, large. And so then, they could start to learn, hey, here's who our client base is around these industries, that the specificity by how well, and I'm telling you, because so many salespeople are so lazy, when you nail it, you hear you hear them go, oh, okay. You hear them be like, oh, wait, this guy actually like knows what we do. Goes back to like that. How do you make money? like, and I feel like the specificity and like you said, the dialed in, this is an interesting kind of follow-up to this one, which was, it seems lazy to start messages with things like, hope you're staying safe, crazy times. How, is your team thoughtfully, he says, thoughtfully acknowledge this. They're currently going through an outbound without sounding like everyone else. In your messaging for the team, are you thinking about that? Are they, and maybe it's not as systematized around how you handle it, but I'm just curious if you all are still, actively mentioning it up front.
It's a tricky one. I don't know if there's a right answer. I think some of it is probably driven by the kind of company that you're reaching out to.
Right. Exactly.
I think certain companies are weathering this and actually doing really well. And so those companies, you may not want to start with the negativity, and you may want to just start with, from what I've seen, your business has got some growth going on. Like being specific about what's positive and what you've seen. So I think having some empathy for their business and understanding what they're going through is something that can be important. But it's a tricky one. Like your response is good until it's not good.
Well, you're right. And
that is in a tough situation.
And just think like that has jumped the shark quite quickly, right? Like it's literally, 4 months in and it's like, wait, should you even say this anymore? But I think that it's right. It's like, you should go in with a little bit of knowledge and insights, and then you kind of know how to deal with it. Like, look, I know other businesses in this type are starting to grow, right? How has this affected you? Right. As opposed to assuming everything's bad for everybody. And I feel like that's equally as bad. So let's go. So if we go to, I think that's great. Email, call. What about LinkedIn, right? Obviously, if you all follow me, and I recognize a lot of names, so I know that a lot of you follow me too. You know that I'm big on LinkedIn in sequences. And I'd be curious, at the enterprise level, what your team is doing or what your clients are doing or how people are thinking about LinkedIn, because it feels like we're kind of at the point now where everyone realizes LinkedIn has got to be involved, right? It's like, it's not like, oh yeah, should we be using LinkedIn? It's like we are, but almost universally, I feel like the ability to standardize it or even create a successful framework that's not just email into a different inbox, right? Like a DM into an inbox. So is there anything that you're seeing out there around LinkedIn? And again, we don't have to get too tactical, but maybe just like the temperature, how often it's brought up when we think about modern outbound.
I could share one of the things that we do is we're typically reaching out to people that we have meetings coming up with, ideally in advance, but sometimes follow up. So if our sellers have a meeting coming up when they want executive support on that particular opportunity, they'll send our leadership a list of people who are going to be in the meeting and with their LinkedIn profiles, and just say, hey, would you mind sending them a note and just offering your support and letting them know that we appreciate their business, and
super smart.
That's been really, really well received by our customers.
That's super, super smart. So basically sending, hey, just go send this guy a note, right? Like, hey, go ahead and reach out to this person to connect. So then they see like, hey, wow, like this person is this company is really interested in doing business with us, as opposed to it's a random person. Yeah, I mean, I think for us, and I'll get a little tactical, for all of you out there, we're just seeing more and more that we're starting a lot of our sequences with LinkedIn. Meaning, the play that I'll talk through with a lot of people is like, let's just take two. And by the way, it all depends. Step one in every new modern sequence is, are they active on LinkedIn? Because if not, then guess what? We go skip straight ahead. If they're not actively commenting or liking on things, then don't spend any more time on LinkedIn trying to get a meeting with David or whoever. But if not, if you can run a list in Sales Navigator as like step one in building your sequence, then you can identify, there's kind of two groups that we see. There's a new tab that says following your company. That's a few months old. So you can know, okay, out of my target list, who's following my company. The other is change jobs in the last 90 days. That nobody brings in a new VP of sales for outreach. They don't bring in a new VP of sales or new VP of marketing to maintain the status quo. It never happens. And so going through kind of your prospect list and quickly identifying those people. Look, I know you just joined. It's day 100. So you've started to get your feet underneath you, and you're probably actively starting to think about how can you drive efficiency or effectiveness. Let's set up time to meet, et cetera. So those can be like much more direct call to actions. If someone is following your company, and you can't set a meeting, I mean, I usually say that you suck at sales, and I'll still say it again. If you can't set a meeting when someone is following, in your case, outreach, they're following the company. Like it's literally a setting now that will tell you, like, pack it up, you're done, right? That's the first start. So we'll say, look, go through your list and build out a sequence in outreach. Step 1 is build a list. Step 2 is engage with everybody in those lists. Day 4, engage with their content. Day 5, so you go through those. And then there's a new feature on the homepage of LinkedIn that says lead shares. So you can say, hey, these people that I have saved, have they shared? And so a lot of our sequences now are when you click on that, day 1 is comment or like on post, wait 4 or 5 days, comment or like on posts, wait 4 or 5 days, and then DM. So connect and like or comment day 1, like or comment day 5, engage days 8. How much of a higher likelihood versus email day 1, call day 3, email day 7? Like how many of you are setting meetings off the first email as is or call? None of you. So step 1 is David now has seen me. And by the way, most executives don't get any comments on their posts, like almost none. So if I comment on 2 of David's posts, he's going to remember who I am. And then I come up with an authentic reason using that research to do outreach versus go straight to emails and calls. I feel like we've evolved, people. Like you can do everything I just said literally in outreach, 100% of it. And again, it doesn't matter if you necessarily do use outreach or not, but the point is, isn't that better to build some amount of like relationship capital versus, just going straight in? And so that's what we're doing a lot of, David, is we're doing a lot of these front loaded with, hey, I saw you I viewed your profile, and then using that as a reason for reaching out. And that's the subject line of the email, right? The subject line of they view the profile, then the next day, hey, saw your profile, David. And then again, they get very specific because then it's like that little hook is only so good. You got to then get deep.
One of the things that we use, and I was kind of, we never did anything like this at my past places where I worked, but I was really impressed with what outreach does is we do what's kind of referred to as a Boolean search, right? So what we'll do is we'll build a list of our customers, and we'll import that into LinkedIn. And what we'll do is we'll look at people who came from,
yes,
who came from a company
yes,
that used our product.
Yes.
Right. So we can run that, and it gives us a phenomenal list of people who are going to be potentially likely to buy from us.
No brainer. I love that. Everyone write that one down. All you do is you upload all your customers, okay? And then you can do a search by previous company equals in your search. And then you just look. That's it. And then you've got 100 target accounts or 60. And then you just look. Set for a vice president of sales, sales director, whatever. Previous company was one of these. Easy one. Write it down. Take it to the bank. David, all right, next play.
The other thing that I've been using LinkedIn a lot for is from a hiring perspective. I think to your point, people who follow your company. When I'm looking to hire in sellers in New York, I'm looking at the normal things, geography, title. I start with who follows my company, and because my assumption is that they're in the space, they know the business. And I've been able to identify people very, very quickly who are, maybe they're not looking, but if they're a user of my product, or they're going to be more likely to say, wow, that's an interesting opportunity. I'd love to have a conversation.
And then I'm their boss. I'm like, David, what's up, man? We're using outreach. Like I thought we were boys here. And then I reach out. But no, I think that's spot on because as a hiring manager, your audience is different. And I think that's as an executive, your audience is going to be different than a sales team's. And that's an important call out when it comes to LinkedIn, it's about your audience, and your audience is different based on where you're at in the org. All right. So we're going to take maybe a couple more here. Glenn was asking about kind of post contact. Like how is your team you mentioned that. I think, Glenn, I don't know if you caught it. One of the plays David talked about is once they set the meeting or maybe even have the meeting, they then will get other people to kind of circle that contact and connect with them, which I thought was a brilliant play. Anything else in kind of driving momentum? So we've really focused pure top of funnel. Anything else about, things that you all are doing that's interesting, or how people are using outreach even to drive momentum in the process, kind of once someone's already engaged?
Well, first of all, I love the word momentum, because it's one thing I use with the team all the time. Is in sales, you either have momentum or you're chasing it, but there's nothing else. And so
That's right.
I think one of the things that we do a lot of is we work with a company called Sendoso. So I'll give them a kind of quick plug, and that allows you to send direct mail to customers. So there are ways of sending capabilities directly to someone's home. So it's easy. We have a conversation with someone. We found out that they went to Ohio State, and I had a situation. I guess it was about a week ago. Someone on the team was wearing a Alabama hat. They had a call with a customer who was an Ohio State fan. Customer was a little bit offended. The representative quickly fixed it. He sent him an Ohio State mug with a funny note.
Easy.
It was an easy thing, and now they're connected. So it's those small touches that are a little bit different, that kind of stand out, that we've had a lot of success.
I agree. I think Sendoso right now is a killer tool that everyone should be integrating as a part of their plays. Because again, it's that touch that you were talking about, that personal touch, that if I can just send you something, you're sitting in your house and you get a box, you've been sitting in the same damn home office for how long? And you get a little something, and it's smart. The key is it's smart. What he did was smart. What doesn't work is sending blind socks out randomly. Be smart. We've seen like a massive, actually I've heard sometimes that people like these socks, but I feel like the socks have also jumped the shark. I feel like everyone went to sending socks, and now socks are like less of a thing now.
Well, that's because no one sees them.
I guess that's a good point. Nobody sees the socks. But again, I think direct mail is a channel that not enough companies, and the reason I see, David, is it's a little bit more difficult to integrate into a repeatable process. And so I see marketing and sales orgs struggle to integrate it effectively. And that's what I see the number one. I'm also, through my fund, I'm an investor in Sendoso, so I have like extra wanting them to be successful. But I really feel like, look, you're trying to stand out. I feel like direct mail is a great way. So look, everyone, David, we're up at the end of our time. This is a true AMA. You killed it, by the way. You killed it. Lots of tactical knowledge in here. Becca and the team will chop this up into some content for everyone, but I think we're going to have a lot of takeaways. So David, any final thoughts, things that we feel like we didn't touch on that you feel is important for people to know? And then also, team, if everyone wants to check it out, we're dropping in here. I was talking to Becca about this. We're dropping in a link here to anyone who's interested in how to integrate some of those LinkedIn sequences. There's a quick link in here. You can go and download that out if you, again, are trying to figure out more and more about the LinkedIn piece. So what about you? Final thoughts, David? Anything to leave people with?
I would leave people with the 4 questions. Really, what problem are we solving? Why does it matter to solve it now? Who's the person that cares about solving it? And when does it need to be solved by? And generally speaking, if you can answer those 4 questions, there's an opportunity. Whether you win it or not, you can't win everything. But if you can answer those 4 questions, I'd be really surprised if win rates weren't higher. Or
your win rate's higher. That's the perfect point. I think that's a good take. Again, I always like the tactical takeaways. So that one for me is a good one. I also like that circling the executives. I think that is such a simple, easy thing that I know what that will do to some. I know that will work, and just intuitively, I'm like, oh, that's good. I'm totally borrowing that. But I think the key thing is like, it's going to increase your win rate, which means you're also going to spend less time with people where it's not right now. And not right now is an okay option. Maybe is what kills you. No and yes are fantastic. No is just as good as yes. Maybe, because you didn't ask these questions, is the worst, right? And again, a lot of this is discipline. And David, I would guess for you ask these same questions on every call, It's like, and I'm the same way. Like people always hate scripts and messages. Like I ask like, will I go deeper in some areas? Sure. But it's the same general set because just like you, I've got my own variations of these four. I just know it equals like consistently the highest quality outcome either way.
The one thing I would say that it's probably an important call out is sometimes if I'm coaching reps, they will use those questions verbatim.
Right.
Just, so they'll talk to a customer and say, what problem are you trying to solve? What, like they're very, very literal. So I just say it's equally important to make it a conversation versus an interrogation. So
that's right.
These are the things that you're listening for. This is where you're going to try to steer the conversation to get this information. But if it's just kind of, you never want to be in a situation where you're just kind of reading off, not that anyone on this call would.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly it. You take these questions and then you just rewrite them in your own language. And the easiest way to make all of these questions, just so you want to know, the easiest way to make every single one of those questions applicable to an executive is say, what are your top 1 to 2? Because we as a human being, when you say, Jake, what are your strategies? I'm like, dude, I'm running a small business. I've got 5 billion. If you say, Jake, what are your top 1 to 2? Our brain can immediately find that piece of info. So anytime you want to make it actionable, top 1 to 2. Just a little pro tip. David, you can.
And then the pro tip on that is, what's holding you back, Jake, from making those successful? What's the risk?
Oh, my gosh. Well, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that before. And then the epiphanies start. And now I have I'm like, man, David's here to help me solve problems. I love it, man. Well, this is a lot of fun, man. I'm looking forward to you and I catching up one-to-one here. I'm going to shoot you a note after this so we can set up some time and start to do some damage together in New York virtually. And look, I hope everyone had amazing takeaways. We dropped the links in there to David's LinkedIn. Make sure to go follow him. Also, like I said, a couple of really good downloads there. Again, if you're kind of interested in some of this modern sequencing. And again, I really enjoyed it, man.
Awesome. Likewise. Thanks so much for the
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.